Good morning, everyone, and welcome back to Fuse Games Conference, a completely free and online conference from Staffordshire University's Games Department. I'm Robert Lambert, your host for the conference, and today you'll be joined by my co-host as well, Jonah Kirtley, third-year game art student at Staffordshire University. We are going to be live on YouTube and our Twitch channels, so make sure that you like and subscribe for further updates and easy access. Otherwise, you can access the timetable, which will be located at the bottom of your screen on a banner shortly. Our first guest today is expert environment artist at That's No Moon, who brings a wealth of experience, and I hope he doesn't mind me saying a bit of an unorthodox route into the games industry, unlike some of ourselves. I'd like to give a warm welcome to both Alex Beddows and Jonah Kirtley. So good morning, both of you.
Good morning, and thank you for the kind introduction.
So Alex, we've done a talk before, and that's why I sort of say an unorthodox route into university. What do I mean by that?
So my entry into the industry was, I'm trying to be polite way to say it's ropey, difficult, not the desired route I'd recommend to anybody. I was basically denied from all my unis. I was not very focused early on. I was trying to play like professional rugby at the same time as getting into the games industry, so I didn't really put as much attention towards my portfolio as I should have. So I didn't get into any of my unis. I ended up sort of getting into the industry a little bit later by working through mobile app design, serious games, iGaming, which is like gambling, indie to like outsource, and then into AAA. But that was
Earn your badges then, really.
Yeah, and there was a lot of like lessons along the way, and a lot of silly mistakes I was making, and it took meeting the right people and hearing the right words to sort of give me the course correct to get back on the right path and actually fix up. And once I like sort of started to get my head straight and my goals aligned, things started to move a bit smoother. But yeah, the first few years, you'd say I made a rod for my own back, to be honest.
I think everybody's experience of getting into industry has its sort of own ups and downs, and certainly we've heard a few sort of different routes this week so far with the guests which we've had. So today we're going to talk about environment art and currently some of the work that you're doing at That's No Moon. I hear that you're moving up the ladder as well.
This role, I'm an expert environment artist. Previously at Respawn, I was a senior expert, being I guess other studios might call them different things, like principal. The work we're doing there, very exciting. I'm very don't know when we're going to be showing stuff, but I am very excited because we've also assembled a killer team there. A lot of people who I entered the industry admiring, peers who were entering the industry similar time to me. So we've all ended up at the same place, which is kind of uncanny, but yeah, it's very exciting.
Cool. Shall we get to it?
Yeah, sure. So I'm gonna present, share screen, and I'm going to share this window. Can you see? Yes, we can see this. Cool. So, this presentation, I'm going to focus on three main topics. So there's three main sections. There's kind of understanding sort of the challenges ahead, and making kind of a plan of how you're going to enter the industry. But the more important one, and the one I want like people to focus on more, and it's been the thing which is probably I learned the most from, is how we execute that plan. Like there's healthy ways to work and unhealthy ways to work, and I encourage everyone at the end, as the third section is Q&A. Like every talk I've ever given, most of the value unfortunately comes from the Q&A section. Asking good questions gets you more interesting answers than any talk will give you. So I encourage everyone to get questions in, but before we dive in, a quick recap about my career. In the professional scene, I've worked for a lot of studios at this point. That's No Moon currently. Previously, I was at Respawn, shipping Star Wars Jedi Survivor. Had a brief stint at The Initiative, counterplay. I worked at ArtStation for a while. And before that, my first sort of AAA gig was working in outsource for Decagon. On the side, I have done lots of bits and bobs. I've mentored via Dynasty and Skilltree. I've given talks at Vertex and View Conference, hosted the ArtStation podcast and my own podcast, and made appearances on various podcasts and articles. But that's kind of enough about me. Also, one thing I want people to understand is everything that I'm talking about, this is kind of also a reflection of my own career. So every point and topic I'm covering is stuff I went through and I had to learn. And it's kind of the way I sort of formulated all of this is stuff I wish I knew at the time, because some of these can waste years of your career if you're not careful. But the most important thing, and this is how I start, like every mentorship I've ever given, every junior I've mentored, every person who's asked for advice off me, it always starts with like, where is it you want to go? Where is it you want to be? What kind of project do you want to work on? There's a funny little quote here from Matthew McConaughey about the process of elimination. And this may sound weird, but it really is helpful for you to understand like what it is you want to do. I'll put my hand up and say I have never made a piece of foliage in my career, and I hope I never have to. I knew day one I did not want to do that. It's just not my jam. So, for example, that straight away, okay, well, I shouldn't be doing portfolio pieces when I'm trying to make foliage. And that sounds obvious, but I have worked with people in the past who will make a load of foliage and then go, oh, I hate this, this sucks, I don't want to do this. And I'm like, okay, well, why did you just spend 6 months on this when you could have spent it on something more productive? So that process of elimination like cannot be underestimated. I knew I didn't want to work on a top-down RTS. Again, I should not be making art which would be applicable to that. Now, this all sounds really obvious, and this is going to get even more obvious when I say, do you want to, what kind of studio do you want to work at? And the same answer I always get is either realism or stylized. And this is where we start to get into the details of actually understanding this industry and where you want to go. Because stylized could be anywhere from God of War to, Stardew Valley. Understanding the nuance that goes into this.
How many times we hear this? And trying to get people to define it is so difficult. Yes,
it is. And like part of me sort of empathizes because, again, I was guilty. I didn't know this. But, if someone says they want to work somewhere where they like zebra sculpt and they want to like be very organic and all this kind of stuff, I wouldn't necessarily recommend you go somewhere like DICE where photo scanning is so prevalent. Someone says that I really hate hard surface modeling. Okay, maybe don't go to 343 and work on a sci-fi space marine adventure. Like, understanding what pipeline and type of game you want to work on is so important. And I really, the word pipeline should be getting drilled into your head, because pipeline is what you're going to spend 90% of your job doing. So if you have zero interest in scans and all that kind of stuff, make sure you're picking a studio which doesn't necessarily rely heavily on it. Now, there's a caveat to this, which is by having a focus, you are not alienating other studios. If you show really promising knowledge and skills to sculpt, for example, yes, you are probably aiming for somewhere like Sony Santa Monica, but all the other studios are going to be just as interested in you if you're putting out good artwork using this stuff. Because when you're producing good artwork, you're also showing you're able to adapt and generate content and you have that like artistic eye. You can learn the other stuff. Every studio has different pipelines. And a lot of the job is, can you adapt to the new pipeline? When I'm interviewing people, I don't expect people to like know exactly how we work, know the exact pipeline, know the exact workflow. But if I can see that their portfolio demonstrates they're able to adapt and use a pipeline, then I can go, okay, well, they use this pipeline, so we could just teach them another one. Whereas if you aren't using any pipeline or any kind of workflow, then it becomes difficult because I'm like, okay, I'm looking at this person's portfolio and I'm wondering, could they do it? Do they understand why we use pipelines and how it actually comes together? So this sounds like very easy for me to say I'm in this position, but This was my portfolio in 2018. I was in a position where I was applying to lots and lots of places. I've been working in mobile games and iGaming for a long time at this point, but I wanted to break into AAA. And I was really struggling. I wasn't getting any replies. And eventually I come across the Dynasty Empire, a learning community, and Jeremy Estrelado, who is now lead environment artist at Ubisoft Massive, gave me a portfolio review. And the main takeaway was, you can't look at this portfolio and know where I wanted to go. There's some stylized weapons, realistic weapons, hard surface sci-fi props, some tech art, some trim sheet workflows. There's no direction to any of this. And because there's no direction, I'm not showing any skill in any one place. I'm spread way too thin. So this is where my portfolio was, and like this, I just want to reiterate, like everything I'm saying, this is how bad I was when I started, and by hopefully applying some of the things and the lessons I learned, hopefully this will help you'll progress and develop. So the main takeaway, I need to find some direction. I need to start developing in one area and grow as an artist. I always bring up Harley Wilson's portfolio. It's one of my favorite portfolios for demonstrating this point. But there's a phrase which got thrown around. It gets used in like all industries and fields, but it's BT shaped. Have a broad knowledge across multiple domains, but have one area which you are very proficient at. Harley started off as a junior environment artist. Now he's a lighting artist. And from day one, you could see he wanted to be a lighting artist. He shows great understanding of graphic design, making props, hard surface, shader work. But you can see every single piece has a key underlying focus on lighting. And then he has all these lighting studies. He is a good environment artist, a fantastic lighting artist. And it's like kind of adding feathers to your cap. And now this T gets, you can get bigger and bigger. So as an artist, you may start and focus on lighting. And then the next thing you step onto is like someone like Brian Leloup, who is looking at shaders and tech, and it's far more about rendering engineering. He's becoming a far more advanced lighting artist. And that's what you're really doing as you progress up the sort of career ladder, is acquiring new skills and becoming broader in knowledge on new skills, kind of linked to the original one. So I always bring up Harley, like he's coming through. He was one of the portfolios I really admired, and it really helped this idea click for me. And this is something I think is worth doing for everybody. Like when you're coming through, is just have portfolios and artists you look at and go, that they did it. They did what I want to do. They have the type of portfolio I want to have. So you have a reference point. It's not a reference point of where I should be right now. Like when I was coming through, this is a far more advanced portfolio than I had, as you saw previously. But it was a great target to aim for, and it gave me something to know that, like, if I'm starting to get close, I must be on the right path. So this is kind of, we're starting to have a direction and give ourselves a direction. This is the most difficult thing to teach people. Only from trying to teach my mentees and other people, this is really hard to drill in, because our personal art, we want it to be fun. I'm a very pragmatic person. So for example, at 2018, after having that talk from Jeremy, I took a year out from applying anywhere, from doing any environment art. I just learned designer, spent a whole year just pumping out material balls, trying to turn one of my biggest weaknesses into a strength. And my T-shape looked like I knew environment art, I knew lighting, I knew how to sculpt, but my broad knowledge was materials. Now, that being said, I did also structure my portfolio where I always put environments at the top, because in my mind, I was an environment artist first, a material artist second. But every portfolio piece should be answering a question. And any of these questions can be, am I trying to get production experience? Am I trying to experiment with a new style, a new pipeline? Even to my materials, like every material, I was like, what happens if I use ZBrush in this way in a material? What happens if I use Blender for like simulations? What happens if I use Marvelous Designer? Can I use scan data atlases, or can I just use raw scan data? And this proved, I wasn't thinking of this at the time, but having this approach to every piece meant when it came to interviews and talking about my work, when someone says, oh, talk us through this environment. I had like a laundry list of things to say because I had this pragmatic approach of tackling goals, what I wanted to get out of the piece, why I stopped. Because one thing that always comes up is, what would you do differently? And there's a million things you could do. I learned from one of my early art directors. He had a phrase where he's like, art's never finished. You can always take art further. You can make the scene bigger and you can learn new skills. But one of the best things you can learn early on is to know when to call it quits on a piece. And the easiest way to do that is to know what you're trying to get out of it. If I just want to focus on ZBrush scoops, which is the one just to the right of the Godfall work, all I wanted was just to sculpt rocks. I just wanted to get my sculpting skills sharpened up. Now, the landscape shader is awful. The shaders on the rocks aren't great. There's not that much prop storytelling. The composition could do work. The lighting could do a lot of work. However, the project wasn't focused on creating this big, beautiful piece of art. The project was focused on giving me a platform to do ZBrush scoops. Now, the next project, I can do a beautiful lighting study or shaders or whatever. There's always the next project. One which I want to call out is the one to the left of the black and white thumbnails, the safe house. It's probably the first scene I did where like it's actually okay. And I completely burnt myself out on it because I spent 6 months on it and then had to take like a 6-month break and then come back to it because I tried to learn how to generate a large quantity of props very quickly, how to apply all my materials to engine. I had to learn shaders, I had to learn simulations, I had to learn a bunch of tech and shader work for lighting. I set too many tasks to learn at once. And this led to, it was a good project and I got to the end of it, but it almost didn't get finished because of all these unnecessary goals I set myself. And from then on, every project was, okay, there's a very simple goal. So for example, the Stairway to Heaven scene, the green and red one in the center, that was none of my art. It's all Megascans. Because I wanted to learn tone mappers. That's all I wanted to do, is learn how to make my own tone mappers and light and make something very close to a reference image. Now, if I turn that camera even like 30 degrees to the left, it looks like garbage. If I turn it 30 degrees to the right, it looks like garbage, because this wasn't about me showcasing building an environment. It's showcasing tone mappers. Having that very binary sort of view on all your projects really helps you get better at skill acquisition. Because if I try to make this a full-blown environment where I make every asset and do the tone mappers, this goes from being a 4-day project to being a 6-month project. And during that time, I still got a bunch of other skills I need to acquire as an environment artist. This is one of the things, the curses of environment art. We use so many software. Like if I go through the software list when I start a new studio and I'm like, oh yeah, I need ZBrush, Houdini, Marvelous, Blender, Maya, Unreal Engine. I'm probably going to need, still probably want XMD sometimes. I need Megascans Bridge. I'm going to need Houdini. I'm going to need, it's ridiculous. Like we use so many tools. So it's kind of a curse that there's a lot of stuff to learn as an environment artist. So a focus on each portfolio piece. As whenever I talk to a student who asks for my advice, first thing I say is, what's your current project? And they show me and I go, why are you making that? And normally the response I get is, I like the art. I'm like, okay, well, I like League of Legends, but I never want to work on that project because it's just not my type of art. I love looking at it, but I never want to work on it. So once again, I go, do you want to work on this type of game? No, not really. I want to work on like Last of Us. Sweet. Okay, so maybe we should change the project you're looking at right now. And it's always like a light bulb moment, but they go, oh yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And again, this isn't me like taking a mick, because I went through this exact phase. So if you take anything from this talk, like really be objective about what you're making and why you're making it. But this is something which probably is like a bit of a hard truth, but like entering this industry as a junior, like meritocracy is the most important thing. The best artists get jobs. The people who work the hardest, the people who apply themselves get the job. You could be the nicest person in the world, and I've interviewed some amazing people who I've really got on with and I liked as people. Their portfolios just weren't as good as the other person's. And this doesn't mean that you have to put your nose to the grindstone and do 20 hours a week, but you have to understand there's almost an upfront cost to entering the industry. It's like you have to work really, really, really hard to get in. And once you're in, you can sort of develop at a slightly slower pace. But there is a huge upfront cost, and you have to be ready to do that. And there's also all the stuff I spoke about previously is all about working smart, not hard. Like, yeah, you could do what I did early on. That 2018 portfolio, which I showed you, that was still like hours and hours and hours and hours of work. But I was not going in the direction. I wasn't focused. I wasn't being pragmatic. The later stuff was actually probably less hard work than the earlier stuff because I was actually like focused and going in a direction. So, and I need to caveat because there's probably senior, if anyone's like a senior looking at this, they're like, that makes sense. As you progress through the industry, meritocracy matters less. Being a good game dev is what matters as you progress. The difference between a mid and a senior is not necessarily, the senior is a much better artist, they're a better game dev, they do the not fun work, they check their JIRAs, they are reliable, they communicate when they need to, they ask questions when they need to. So this rule of like meritocracy kind of has a diminishing return the further you go through your career. Also, I have interviewed some rock stars in the industry who, it's like I could have the 100% quality artist who has a 50% personality, or I could take the 70% artist who has 100% personality. I take the personality person because culture and being able to enjoy working with your colleagues is very, very important. This job is very stressful. Spending 70% of your day around people you don't like is I wouldn't advise it. So take the sort of the progression through your industry, with a grain of salt of meritocracy matters less. But early on, you need to drill this into your head. Like, this is just, it's not a nice fact, but it is a fact. Like, it's the most important thing. But this now comes on to, so we've talked about like kind of planning and understanding and this sort of stuff. Now I want to talk a bit about execution. And I heard this quote from Brian Dyson about like life is a juggling act, and you're juggling balls, and there's some glass ones and some rubber ones. And the way he explained it is like family and friends and all this sort of stuff is a glass ball, and if you drop it, it's going to shatter. And a work ball, if you drop it, it's going to bounce back up. And it makes sense, but it never really sat right with me. Like, in my early 20s, I was very, what's the way to hustle culture, work really hard, do everything. And this never really sat right with me until one of my colleagues linked me a tweet from Nora Roberts where she took this phrase and she says, yeah, life is a juggling act. You're not juggling 5 balls, you're juggling 50. And in each group of, work, health, family, whatever, there's rubber and glass balls. And the example she gives is you have a choice between focusing on silly sock day for your kids tomorrow, or do we focus on this project, which is, super important, the deadline's tomorrow and we need it done. Clearly, to her, the silly sock day is the rubber ball. If I drop this work ball, I don't have a roof over our head anymore. So clearly that's a glass ball. On the flip side of it, do I go to my brother's wedding, or do I spend some time following a tutorial and develop learning substance designer? Clearly, I should probably go to my brother's wedding. So this logic sits a bit better with me because it gives a little bit of nuance to the topic. Now, one thing I'll say is these change over the years. Early 20s, pretty much everything but work with rubber balls that I would drop all the time. And there comes a point, I'm a pragmatic person. In the same way I applied to learn and develop my portfolio, I had to switch mindset. Okay, I need to work on my friendship circles, my family, and my health. And they became glass balls. And now it's a bit more balanced. It's not all in one basket. But I think this is really important, because I just said that meritocracy is really important. So there should probably be quite a few work glass balls. And you are probably going to sacrifice some things. You may have to sacrifice how much you play games. You may have to sacrifice every weekend going out and, partying or doing stuff. There may be some days where you have to say, no, I'm going to stay in this one day and focus on work. but I don't want it to go, so far down the spectrum that you're like alienating everyone in your life and you're miserable because you focus so hard on work, like I did. Not a good idea. It wasn't fun. Now, during the COVID era to now, like, this is the most important question I ever got. Like, I get asked this all the time, and I hate it. My blood boils whenever I get this, because people say, "Oh, how do you manage your time? You do so much, blah blah blah," and it's really annoying because it's kind of like you think that time, like, you're treating how I use my time like I treat it as the old phrase, like, everyone has 24 hours in a day. That's kind of bullshit. Like, time is objective, but we are not objective creatures. And I know everyone will understand this, because if we've ever said, I'm going to go on a diet and lose weight and I'm going to stop eating junk food, we've told ourselves we're going to do that, but inevitably at some point we decide to have a cookie or go to McDonald's. You can't just say, oh, there's 24 hours in a day, so I'm going to work really hard. Just like I can't say to myself, I'm going to stop drinking energy drinks when I have one right next to me. We're not these binary creatures you can just tell us what to do. It doesn't work like that. So I always get frustrated by that question. What I instead focus on is this idea of mental bandwidth. We have a meter in our head of like how much we can work before we get burnt out. And there's all different things that contribute to it. From our personal circumstances to how much work we're doing to the variety of work. So when I was at my most efficient and I'm, really doing a lot, or it seems like I'm doing a lot, it's more about me managing these three things in order to allow me to have the maximum output. So people think that this is how it works. I do more work, and the more work I do, the more effort required, and there's a linear scale. It's absolutely not the case. If it was this case, everyone would be a superstar. It does not work like this. It's more like this. It's easy to do work, and then the more work you do is exponential, the increase of effort it takes. After a full day of work of say for example, doing material work, even just the idea of then opening Designer and doing my own material work, it's this huge amount of effort required from me to do it, because I've been doing it all day. I can't do more of the same thing. It's so difficult to kind of build up to this. This is how it works. Like, this is how I view volume when it comes to work. There is an exponential increase in effort required. So how do I maintain being productive? It's about having variety. It's about, if I spend all day doing admin work, I should probably do some artwork. If I spend all day doing artwork, maybe I should focus on some learning and some mentoring. And I'm constantly switching up between these things so that I never get that big exponential increase. And the way that looks is this. As I'm starting to get fatigued with art, I stop and I reset and I go to do admin work, and I go do admin work for a bit. And as I start to get fed up of admin work, I'll stop and I'll maybe do some learning. We're still getting an increase. Like, there's still, it's steadily trending upwards, but it's not as bad as if I was trying to do art for 13 hours a day. Like, you just wouldn't be able to get through it. But by being like this, I can maybe be a bit more productive and be a bit more efficient. Now, like I said, this is like me a couple of years ago, where like I was still very focused on refining my career and figuring out where I wanted to go. I still do a lot of these, but this is where, like, those first two topics are the easy topics to cover, and they're the really obvious ones where like everyone goes, light bulb, great, makes sense. This is the one where people either don't want to be honest with themselves or wish it wasn't true. But you as the artist is the most important factor to your output and your mental bandwidth. I am a turtle. I can sit at my desk for 15 hours and I'm not efficient, but I can get the work done. And I might meander and procrastinate and whatever, but I'll come back and I can just slowly march along like a tractor. I'm not very fast, but I will go for ages. Some people are rabbits. They're like a sports car. They can, when they're on. They're super focused. They can like crank out a ton of work in a short space of time. But once they've done that, they need to take a break. They can't just sit at the desk. If they sit at the desk for another 8 hours, they will do nothing because they're completely burnt out. And understanding who you are and where you sit in even this camp is going to affect everything I've just spoke about before. This is the most important thing. Like this who you are as a person. I'm not sure many artists may or may not have seen this graph, but where you are in this graph is going to affect your productivity. Essentially, it equates to sometimes we have our artistic eye and our artistic ability. When our artistic ability is more advanced than our artistic eye, we feel great about our art. We're looking at it and we go, this is sick, I'm making great work, this is amazing. We're feeling positive and we're probably being a bit more productive. But if your artistic eye is more advanced than your artistic ability, you're looking at your own work going, oh man, this sucks, this is terrible, I wish this was better, I wish that was better. And this fluctuates up and down. Like even me today, I'm like, you'll hit this regularly, and this will affect your productivity. When you're feeling bad about your work, you're not going to want to work. And learning where you are on this graph at any one point is going to help you kind of min-max your time and be a healthier worker. This one people have probably seen a million times, but I always want to call it out because it's so it's kind of like it sits under the radar a little bit. Like, I don't know why I feel horrible about my art, but I feel horrible about it. And normally that can death spiral into just absolutely hating your art forever. And you need to understand, no, it's a positive thing. You're understanding to look at art better. Your artistic eye is so important as an artist. So when you do reach the point of my art looks terrible, that for me now, that's more the motivator, because I say, well, okay, my art looks terrible, but I'm able to acknowledge that I don't need an external factor to tell me. That's a positive thing, and that's you growing as an artist. And then there's everything else. You know, there's stuff that's going on at home, stuff at work, social media, the ramifications of COVID. All of these things will affect your output. If you have a ton of responsibility at home with family, then you can't commit the same amount of time as maybe someone who's just in uni and their only focus is being at uni. They don't have other responsibilities. You're going to have a different pace and a different schedule to others if you're having to work a full-time job. So for me, early on I was playing full-time rugby and I was a construction worker. I could only dedicate like an hour or two a night to my personal development compared to, say, for example, somebody who's working part-time and they have more hours to dedicate. Social media is a huge factor. I would get very burnt out looking at all the amazing artists on ArtStation and going, oh, why am I not like that? Oh, they're doing this, I should be that. I suck because they're there and I'm here. And comparing myself to others, this was a huge factor on my mental bandwidth. And then I don't need to go into why COVID would take up some mental energy. That goes without saying. So now the dreaded term. Everyone has heard burnout. And I've been burnt out multiple times. And I never really figured out what it is. Because I'm the sort of person, I need to understand what something is to like kind of take it seriously. And I didn't know what it was until like I was starting to put these talks together and I was looking at that linear graph and the effort required, and I realized burnout is where like the start point, instead of being at the bottom, works its way up. Even just the thought of opening Substance Painter is like, oh God, it takes so much momentum and energy just to click on an icon and press play, to start working. The base level of energy required is exponentially higher when you're burnt out, and also the exponential increase of that energy is way more aggressive. So when you're burnt out, this is why you need to rest and take a break off, because you can't work like this. Like, no one can. Even the most hardened veteran professional who's crunched to death on the biggest projects, when you're burnt out, you're not going to be able to work through this. No one can. I don't know anybody who's been burnt out who's just powered through it. And if anyone does know someone like that, I'd love to meet them and maybe we get them psychoanalyzed, because that's insane. So hopefully you understand mental bandwidth a bit better. It's a gauge we have to manage, and as it's creeping up towards burnout, maybe we should take the foot off and be a bit more compassionate to ourselves and understand our life situation. And when it's low and we feel great, maybe that's the time where we go, oh, maybe I should put my foot on the pedal a little bit and do a bit more. So we come back to this question: how do I manage my time? And you understand now why I hate it. But I do have empathy. I understand why people ask this, because there's snake oil salesmen out there. There's people who tell you, do these 3 things and you'll be amazing. Do these 5 habits and you'll have success. Here's the one thing you're doing terrible, and if you just change this, you'll be an incredible worker. And it's like, I get why people always ask me this question and why people focus on it, because content like this exists, and they think if I'm just missing the secret step, the one thing I need in order to help me progress, because they see this and they go, well, it's 5 steps, and maybe there's just one of them. Alex will be able to tell me what that one step is, and then you rig out, everything's fixed. So I have empathy to why people ask me, and I do not get frustrated at people when they ask me, but I definitely have a very well prepared answer. And it's also, I think, one thing to also talk about this. These are, 3 steps for guaranteed success. The stuff I'm talking about is not 3 steps to guarantee success. It's steps to understand yourself better so that you can, over the course of a year or 2 years, refine your work habits to be healthier. It's not quick. It's not easy. It's not a quick fix, which is probably why people gravitate towards this sort of content. They want the quick fix. But that is enough about me rambling. That is enough of me hammering through what mistakes I made in my career and things I think we should do differently. I think now is where I'd love to hear from everybody else, hear questions, and hopefully help you all probably answer a bit more of the nuanced stuff you have to deal with. And
So
we'll
we've
also
got
stop sharing.
a question in the chat, a few of them actually.
Sure.
So I'm going to start with this one because it's sort of more personal to the individual. So Eleanor Richardson says, "Hi Alex, at the moment I feel like my environment art portfolio looks similar to many others. Do you have any tips for people looking to stand out on their application?"
Yeah. So there's an old joke, for example, for weapon artists. They make the AK. Everyone makes an AK. And for environment artists, the joke tends to be rock corridor, which I have, and sci-fi corridor, which I've done. I think if you can have a piece that sets your portfolio apart aesthetically, it is a huge win. It's a very positive thing. The difficulty is finding the content to inspire you. A lot of people gravitate towards games they like and are popular, and therefore base their scenes off that. So it's no secret that when Last of Us came around, suddenly there's an upsurge in these foliage-heavy post-apocalyptic scenes. God of War comes around and there's these rocky caverns with snow and Nordic inspiration. I think it's about where you find your inspiration. I think one thing to set my portfolio aside was I have a keen interest in photography, and I started taking my inspiration from street photography, and my references were either my own or I'm looking at photographers where environmental artists don't necessarily start there. They normally start with concept art and stuff like this. Another mistake I see a lot is people are grabbing concept art off of either trending on ArtStation or off Pinterest. And when I search, what's a good example? Sci-fi corridor to Pinterest, the first 50 results everyone sees. And of the first 50 results, if you pick a concept, if there's 20,000 artists all looking for a sci-fi corridor, they're probably also picking similar content. So to your question, I think to stand out on an application, find more unique reference or projects you want to make. I use photography as an example, but there's movies, books. One which has become quite prevalent for me is D&D. Trying to figure out some of the spaces I'd make in D&D, what they might be as environments, has been very interesting. So yeah, hopefully that's quite a simple answer, but I think it's just getting away from the mainstream references that everyone else is using will help you a lot have a more unique looking portfolio.
So the next comment is probably a bit more personal to you.
Sure.
But Leon Artie is asking, what's the pros and cons of remote that you're experiencing a few years in? So I'm presuming that's about remote work rather than anything else.
Okay. So one key piece of context to this is I was working remote pre-COVID. I was already sort of on that bandwagon anyway. So I had a little bit more of a leeway to adapt. Remote work is like, I also work for Americans, and I have done for the past like 5-6 years. So I'm going to split this into two, and I ask that you take it with a grain of salt that I'm talking from working with Americans. That's my perspective, not working remote for UK. So working remote, a lot of it for me is you have to hold yourself very accountable. That's a difficult thing. Now, that isn't believe it or not, it's not about making sure I do the work. It's about making sure I don't do too much. I literally had this happen yesterday where I worked like 3 or 4 hours more than I probably should have. Don't even notice it. It's really easy for that time to slip away. So I'm having to be very careful and aware of, I've worked like 11 hours today. Tomorrow, I'm going to probably take a couple of hours short. Now, this is easy for me to do because I work for an American studio, because we have flexi time, and I have everyone has different schedules at my studio. We are able to, I work for an EU team, but there's also an American team, and I kind of go, like, I'll work a few hours in the morning, sync up with the EU guys, take a big break, work the afternoon, take another big break, work the evening. And I'm having almost like 3 sections to my day. That allows me to kind of take time where I need it. So for example, this morning, because I worked late last night, I'm not going to work in the morning. I'll make that time back up, and I will just work the afternoon and evening. And this is important because, and this isn't about like necessarily just me and my mental bandwidth and my output. This is more about hidden crunch and estimates and all this sort of stuff. If my lead is seeing, or my director is seeing like the work get done in 2 weeks, but really I've spent like every day doing an extra 4 or 5 hours, and that task is actually more like a 3-week, 4-week task. The next time he estimates that task, it's going to take 2 weeks. No, there was a load of hidden time put into this, which is no longer accounted for. So that's why I think remote is a lot of responsibility to make sure we're not putting too much time into things, or at least too much time which isn't accounted for is the important thing. Get more into personal stuff. I make remote work for me. Like, I use it as an opportunity. I train 2-3 times a day because remote work allows me to. I'm able to get ahead of chores during the week so that my weekend is not spent just cleaning or doing errands. You kind of make it work for you. Now, I have heard other studios where, and this is mainly British studios, where they're a bit more archaic, and they're like, no, you need to be working between like 10 and 4 all the time. Your lunch is 1 hour, and it's like, does it really matter? Like, as long as you're there for meetings and your work gets done, that's my view, but that's because I've worked remote now for like studios who are very pro remote. I think there's still a lot of things to learn from remote for studios. I think they I'm speaking mainly to British studios. There's a lot to learn on how they manage their staff and make sure we have happy people. But sorry, that was a bit of a tangent and a long-winded answer. I hope that answers your question about remote. And if there's anything more specific you want to know, like ask away.
I think it's quite an important conversation though with the amount of work that you're doing. And then if I was to try and link that to a question that I've got, because we're talking about portfolios, we're talking about how much time people are spending working, etc. What is a size of a project that students or people building a portfolio should be trying to go for? You talked a lot about the size of your projects, but some of them being too large, some of them being very focused. In terms of quantity or a metric of size and scale, like, what is something that you would expect to see as a portfolio piece? Are we talking sort of really finite and really hyper detailed small area, or are you wanting something more expansive?
I always lean away from something expansive, because one thing to understand is most studios which have expansive environments have very specific tools and workflows to make that work, because expansive environments are expensive. I always say this is for me when I'm mentoring people, make a more intimate space from one camera angle, but follow a pipeline that is almost over the top. Like, make a modular kit, even though it's just like one archway. Still make the kit, because what I want to see is, okay, you made an intimate space, but you followed a pipeline that can very easily scale into other things. You've made a modular kit for a door, but it's only two doors and one door frame. You are following a pipeline which, okay, in this intimate space feels unnecessary, but very easily scales out. That's why I always look at, is why I talk about pipelines so much. Like, big or small, it's about following something. And that's why I say go with small, because it makes it easier to focus on the art and make it both a beautiful piece of art whilst focus on some sort of pipeline.
With that being said, Alex, what's the most important pipelines that an environment artist should be trying to illustrate within their portfolio? What is something that, if you're looking for a junior working on a project with yourself, what are you looking for?
Sure. So what I don't want is props. Like, we have prop artists, we have outsourced studios. I don't want to see just one-off props, because it's a great... So I don't mind the odd one where it's like, I'm showing I can use Painter to a really high level. That's fantastic. Great. That's a props artist job, which nothing wrong with that, but we're environment artists. So I want to see, like, smart solutions. An example would be, okay, we're going to make a modular kit. Okay. What goes into a modular kit? Well, I'm going to need, obviously, my building blocks. So if we're making a wall, like 2 wall variants, a window variant, and a damaged version. Cool, we've got 4 walls. How do I make sure they're consistent? Well, I don't want to make unique textures for every single one, because otherwise, every time I need a new one, I need to make this like really time-consuming process for a new texture. Okay, instead, I'll make a shader, which uses the same tileable texture across each asset, and then I'll use like a grunge mask to just add my details. Now, instead of having 4 walls, each with their own normal map, each with their own albedo map, each with their own roughness, instead I have 4 pieces of wall with each with its own normal map, but then a shared set of albedos and roughness and all these sorts of things. And then if someone says, oh, I want to scale that up, I want 10 more pieces of wall, instead of having to add like 30 textures, I'm only adding like 10. And that's it. That's why I talk about scalability. Okay, that may seem over the top when there's only 2 pieces of wall, but when I'm interviewing you and I look at your portfolio, I'm looking at it and going, okay, this is scalable. This is a pipeline. And also they got good results. Like, it looks good in the scene. That's why I say go small and go intimate, because it allows you to focus on good results and not quantity over quality. That's a terrible thing to do. Don't try and do a gigantic scene that's poorly executed. Do a smaller scene, well executed, but following a pipeline. And so just to round off your question, yeah, modular kit with a smart shader solution. That's just one. The other one could be like, how do I want to do my ground? Okay, I'm going to need a sort of low frequency material for the landscape. I'm going to need like a big rock kit, a small rock kit, and a rubble pile. But I'm not going to make everything unique. I'm going to have like 2 tileable textures that go across all the rocks, so that we're sharing resources and they're having like a harmonious look. And then I'll give variation some smart way in the shader. This is a good pipeline versus every rock having its own set of unique textures. So every time I need to scale that pipeline, I'm having to exponentially increase the amount of textures I have to add, and that's very expensive. Does that make sense? Does that answer your question?
Yeah, and I think it's sort of looking at how do you manage what's expected within a portfolio to what do you want to work on, and actually sort of leading back to sort of the feeling of the entire talk, which is making sure that you're doing the right things, not necessarily just doing everything to show that you can. And I think that what I picked up on a point there that you made about using technical solutions to be able to manage larger projects being something that you want to see. When it comes to managing things like texture maps and the size of those within those larger projects, what kind of technical specifications do you want to see people working on with, and what kind of solutions, or what? In fact, let me rephrase that.
Mhm.
what kind of wastage do you not want to see?
Okay. So wastage is like I want to make this whole new tileable for a change in color variation. I have a rock wall and I want like a darker rock. I'll make a brand new texture map for it. You could also just use a hue slider in Unreal. That's the kind of wastage I don't want to see, where it's like you've not even tried to be smart, you've just kind of been reckless. Texture sizes I wouldn't worry about. Like in Unreal, there's some great tools for optimizing that sort of stuff. And unless you have a keen interest in the tech side of things like that, and you want to like come up with smart solutions and lean into that, then I'd look into it. But like in general, 2 or 4K or 2K is probably fine for your tilers and textures. Anything different, you're starting to get to quite nuanced workflows where it's like studio specific and how they might handle their textures or certain texture sizes within channels and all that kind of stuff. So I would focus. The wastage comes from just reckless workflows and reckless solutions. So like the first one, I want an albedo variation, so I'm going to make a brand new 2K texture rather than rely on maybe some. When I say static shifts, I mean like constant shifts. Black and white images 0 to 1. So if I want something to be more rough, don't make a new roughness map. Just shift it down a numeric value to like get it to look closer to what you want. So that's the kind of wastage I wouldn't want to see. If I saw that, that would be a red flag. Like, because it's not a particularly complex thing, and I say that because I've seen it. Like, I've interviewed people where, like, why did you do that? Like, why did? Well, I wanted a dark colored rock. Okay, is there any other reasons you did that? No, I just wanted a darker rock. I'm like, okay, cool. So that was just why you did it. Okay, good to know. Even from a junior, I expect at least some awareness of the textures are expensive and we should not throw them in recklessly. So to your point, yeah, it's type of wastage. That's sort of stuff I look at. Right now, I have more leniency towards stuff like tri-count and stuff because nanite is such an unruly, uncertain thing that even like some of the best tech artists in the industry right now we're learning things every day about nanite. So polycounts I have a little bit more leniency with these days.
Okay, we've got another question that's in the comments that is a bit more personal to you. So, what's next in your career? It seems that you've gone from mobile AA style and as counterplay, and more recently AAA studios, both established and new. By all means, you've made it. But what's next? Leon RT asks.
There's a few parts to it. So the long term, there's always been the plan, the long term goal. One day I would want to be and there's like associate art director, then art director, then creative director, then maybe a game director. Like there's all of that career side of things, that's like years away. But that's a long term thing. There's the games I want to work on. Like a big thing for me is, and a big thing that goes into choosing my studios now is, I want to make games that people will talk about in 10 years. Like you look at what Last of Us is today. The people were making Last of Us 1, I don't think they dreamt it would ever be as big as it is. And that's a legacy they're all going to leave behind. This is one of the reasons I joined TNM. I really believe that they are trying to do something special. The team that we have Jacob Minkoff, who is the lead designer on Last of Us 1. We have like the art directors, we have the character art directors. Like we have these people that I looked at and I went, okay, they would not be here unless they wanted to do something special. And I want to do something special. So that's a big thing for me. What's next is I want to make sure I'm working somewhere and I'm shipping a project that I'm really proud of and I want to be at. Now, this is something that's a bit easier to, like, it's a luxury I have later in my career. Earlier in your career, it's a bit more like I get the projects I can get. And then the other part of it is I want to stay more rounded as a person. Like, I have a bunch of hobbies. I want to make sure I still have these hobbies. I want to stay healthy. I want to maintain a good marriage. I want to keep with my friends and not upset everyone and make them abandon me. Like a big part of this is doing all this whilst maintaining them circles. haven't really got into it, and I probably won't now. But there's a talk I did, most recent podcast on my art station, called Game Dev Origins, where I got into it. But doing all of this, grinding in my career and stuff, destroyed a lot of relationships for me. Like my relationship with my wife broke down, like my friendships broke down, and it's like, okay, like I had to repair that and I had to fix it, and that's a big focus for me going forward, is doing all of this not at the cost of everyone else. So yeah, to answer that question, 3 things. One day I want to be an art director. I want to ship projects that will leave a legacy. I want to do it whilst not alienating my entire personal life. I think that's pretty it. Yes, it is.
This kind of career, and I think that when you sort of mentioned about your start within sports as well, and I think it's coming from those sort of those industries which are really sought after in terms of roles within them. I think there's a similarity there, and being able to manage that, I think, is somewhat of a task, to put it lightly.
Yeah.
And I think the pieces of advice that you're giving there reign true with a lot of individuals, whether they are currently in university, trying to work on a portfolio, or actively working in industry as well. I think everybody's fighting their own battles, and it's just a case of perhaps be kind to that next person that might be trying to manage theirs in that their own way as well. Slightly pivoted conversation within the next question that's in the comments. Eleanor Richardson has asked again a more sort of environment-based question, which is, what are your thoughts on procedurally generated environments? Is this becoming a necessary skill for students looking to get a role in the industry, and which they should learn?
Yes, it is. It's one of the things which is on my, so for example, years ago when substance designer first came on the scene, that was the big feather in your cap to have. Like, if you knew substance designer, you were like, oh, it's a procedure to make materials. That's a big skill. Like, not many people have that skill. And we're kind of at that point now with, say, Houdini. If you know Houdini as an environment artist, that's a huge feather in your cap, because procedural is a huge part of our work. Like, we have to, because games are getting so big and complex, we can't hand make everything. We have to pick and choose our battles. 100%. If I see a student who's got an environment on their portfolio and they've got examples of Houdini work in there, or they use Houdini to build some of their part, that's that automatically bumps that person up in my estimations. It's to the point where I know Houdini kind of, not nowhere near as much as I want to, and it's that's one of the things I'm like, I need to understand this better. I need to, because I have to always ask tech out, hey, I know what I want, I just don't know how to do it, and they help me build it. That's one of the skills I want to develop on, is the procedural side of things. 100%. Juniors out there, make sure you know some procedural tech. Now there's Houdini, there's procedural modeling in Blender, there's obviously a substance designer for procedural materials. There's a lot of procedural tools in Unreal. There's PCG graphs and stuff like this, which if you look at the Electric Dreams demo from Unreal, you'll see the power of it. It's a very, very robust system that you can create so much good content in a short space of time. So, in a nutshell, yes, procedurally generated environments are incredibly important. That isn't to say you use them at the sacrifice of quality. They're there to augment your workflow. They're not there to be your entire workflow. I do see the mistake of some students making entirely procedural content, and it's it lacks that artistic touch to take it from being 50% to 100%. The way I see procedural content is you should use it to get you to 80% in a really short space of time, and then you spend that last 20% really focusing down on what matters, rather than spending 100% of your time trying to get the entire scene to an okay point. So pretty simple, straightforward question, that one.
So with that being said, Alex, who do you look out for then? Who gives you inspiration on trying to learn that content? You say you're at the start of your journey. I bet a lot of other people will be as well.
This is a bit of an easy one. Easy answer for me, but it's harder for other people. Is my peers. You know, I work with the other expert environment artist at That's No Moon, Chris Reisenbowl, X343, ex BioWare, incredible artist. Like I see how he knows Houdini, and I'm like, oh, I need to learn what he does, and then from that. You know, our lead tech artist, I see what he could do. Matt Williams, he's insane. Like the entire tech art team. I look at what they do, and I can see what they can do, and I go, "Oh, I need to look at that." We one of our tech artists, Mike. He's basically been building like PCG tools, and it's like, "Oh, you can do that? Okay." What? And I'm asking him questions like, "What if I did this?" And he's like, "Yeah, we could do that." And he builds it in. I'm like, "Oh, okay." All the things I think I would want to be able to do, you can do. So a lot of my inspiration comes from my peers. Before that, it's hard. Without going like directly into like people like Simon, the Houdini, like it's a really specific guy. Like he calls himself like Houdini guy, Simon, and I can't remember his second name. But if you search Houdini Simon into our station, he comes up. He was someone I looked at a lot because he was ahead of the curve on a lot of this stuff. So yeah, my inspiration personally comes from my peers. Like they're the ones who make me go, oh, I could be better. Look how much work they can get done. Yeah, that's not a good answer though, to be honest, because not everyone has access to peers immediately.
Yeah, I guess I want to follow up on the question that was asked in the chat, right? It was talking about like procedural environments and stuff, but it was also asking the broader question of like necessary skills you're looking for, right? So kind of to follow up on that a bit more, are there any other essential skills that you're looking for that I guess a lot of applications aren't showing or that you'd like to see more of? Or is there anything that's kind of new, like photogrammetry and stuff, for example, that you'd want to see more
of? This is probably going to lean into a bit of what I was talking about early on about, you know, if you want to do a bit of photogrammetry, now look, you can look at a lot of games and spot if they do photogrammetry. Like you look at Call of Duty, the Modern Warfare games, there's clearly photogrammetry there. So if I want to work there, I should probably have something. The things that are key, I'd say I'd want my environment artist to know how to author tilers. You don't need to be some crazy expert materials, but I expect you to know how to author tilers. It's not essential, but I'd like them to at least know the basics of ZBrush. I'd like them to know what trim sheet is and have like used them. Not because I want them to be a hard surface artist, but because trim sheets teach you to work smart, not hard. You know, I can make an entire like architecture set with 2 tilers and 2 trim sheets versus making like a ton of unique. So the trim sheet is more like a demonstration of a pipeline. And a basic understanding of like a material pipeline, like, you know, oh, I pack my textures into an RGB mask. I mask in the dirt using the red channel. I mask in the grime using the green channel. Like that basic understanding, at least. And then on top of that is the execution, a good art piece with all of those previous things in mind. Then on top of that, that's where we start adding like, that's the hat. And then we're adding feathers to the hat with, oh, he knows a bit of photogrammetry. Oh, he knows a bit of Houdini. Oh, that person knows foliage. Oh, that person knows lighting. Like we're adding feathers to the hat at that point. But for an environment artist, the things I mentioned previously are like the core things I think I'd like to see. That being said, every studio is different. One studio could potentially not care less about ZBrush. The other could be like, I don't care about your materials. We hire a material artist for that. It varies from studio to studio, but I think as playing it safe, that would be the core skill set I'd want to see.
Okay, cool.
So, you mentor a lot of people to get into environments. What is the most typical thing that you have to pick people on that you see more often than not in their portfolio pieces that they shouldn't be doing?
This is easy. This is such an easy one. So whenever I start mentorship, the first thing I say to them is, I want you to go and pick a concept. I want you to go. I'm not going to say anything. I want you to I want to see where your head's at with what you think would be a good concept for you. And funny enough, the same concept has come up 3 times now, of my, like, I think I've done like 20 plus mentorships, but like it's weird to have the same piece of concept art come up. It is a huge snowy valley with a Viking tomb out in the background. This huge space with icicles and a blizzard and a statues and damaged ruins and like there's a wooden tribe built into it. And I'm like, that would take my production team at least 6 months to make. At least. That's a full professional production team. The thing I always see everybody do wrong is scale. This comes back to understanding what goes into making a game. That space is a full level that would take a production team months to make. You are one person at the beginning of your career. So everyone's portfolios, every time I see a bad piece, like a really bad piece, it tends to be they went too big and they spread themselves too thin. Smaller, more intimate. I don't need you to make an entire game environment. I need you to demonstrate you can make art to a good quality in a pipeline. I don't need the full 360. Like, I want one good key shot, a couple of good supporting shots within a pipeline. I also don't want to get misconstrued. I don't want to see like a key shot where you've sculpted everything and unique textured everything and it looks sick, but it's like, that's not a pipeline. That's not how we make game art. So that's one thing, is scale is always it's pretty much the number one thing. I don't think any of my mentees has ever come back with a good concept the first time, understanding like what I'm trying to get at. The other thing is megascans. Knowing how to use it. So for example, my Stairway to Heaven scene, I did not want to be judged on my ability to author props because the entire thing is megascans. I wanted to be judged on my lighting and my tone mapper and shaders. So, that being said, if I see an entire megascan scene where it's like foliage and dirt, but none of it's your assets, it's just the megascan's assets. Okay, I can't judge on the content, so I have to judge based on composition and lighting. They're the only two things I've got to go off. And if they're not absolutely kick-ass, lighting and composition, even remotely bad, I'm going to be like, this is terrible, because that's all you had to do. Like, you didn't have to make any of his content. So the other thing I see people use megascans as a bit of a crutch. And they're not aware that, okay, fine, you can use megascans and get your environment made really quick, but I'm going to judge you really hard on your composition, your world building, and your lighting. And normally that's where people fall short when they're using megascans. So they're the two things. Like, one is the inability to understand like the scope of a piece of concept art, and the other one is using megascans incorrectly and probably selling themselves short.
Okay, so my next one is really sort of a conversational piece between sort of ourselves, I guess. I always see mentor-mentee relationship as more of a shared relationship than it is a hierarchical one. And I like to be in positions of where you learn something from them just as much as you do toward them. Has there been an experience for you where you've learned from your mentees, and also what can you do, or how can you go about your relationship with a mentee to get the most out of it from your experience from both sides?
Sure. So there's three parts to this. One is one of my mentees. I mean, Ian Smith, he created some beautiful art from my mentorship. I learned a lot from him for Houdini. He's a really good Houdini guy. Like, he used Houdini for pretty much all his solutions, stuff I couldn't do. Like, I would not be able to do. And I'm picking his brain. Like, as I'm seeing him do it, I'm giving him his feedback. I'm also like, how did you do that? Like, what is that? Why did you choose to do that? And he gives really good answers. So Ian, he taught me a lot from a Houdini perspective. Like, one thing to remember, and it's a very interesting thing, is seniors have probably been and seniors, experts, leads have been in the same pipeline probably for a while. Juniors entering the industry tend to be on a cutting edge. They're learning the newest thing. A lot of juniors who come in have taught me, juniors, mentees, they're both the same to me. Like, they have taught me a lot. Like, I have learned new tools, new ways to use tools, new ways to pack textures, new ways to do new nodes in Designer. And I'm like, oh, you use it like that? Oh, okay, that's interesting. That's a really good thing. Like, it's impossible for an artist to like do their job at a good level and stay absolutely on top of the cutting edge of what's happening in the industry and software. Juniors are great for that because they get into the industry using that cutting edge. So when they enter the studio or a mentee comes to me, they're aware of things I'm not aware of, and I'm going, oh, okay, I need to look into that and I need to learn. And the last thing, and this is like and I know you're going to probably appreciate this, is teaching helps you understand what you do better. And this is, I've taught rugby, I've taught jiu-jitsu, I teach game art. Like, when I teach someone something, I have to articulate it. I have to come out of muscle memory and subconscious habits and actually be able to verbalize why I do the thing. Why do I put the detail there? Why do I do this process? Why do you block out first? It's like, although it's super obvious, it's like, well, why do I? And then I'm having to articulate all these things. So every time I mentor and I'm having to like phrase something slightly differently, or I have to teach a slightly different workflow, it's forcing me as the teacher to actually understand this on a more fundamental level and not just have it in muscle memory and not have an answer where I say, well, I just do that. And whenever I do, I have come to that multiple times. I've actually started a mentorship on Monday, and I came to that. It's like, why do you do that? Why? Like, normally people just say, yeah, okay, I'll do that. Well, why do we do that? And I'm like, we just do. And I'm like, well, that's not a good answer. Okay, I'll get back to you next week. And I'll have that more better articulated. So teaching is great for that. Like, it's fantastic for sort of, I develop myself. Not necessarily they help me develop. It's more I develop myself by the act of teaching. So there's 3 parts to it. You get some people who just have killer skills that they can teach you. Juniors and people entering the industry are just ahead of the curve a little bit on tech. And like, teaching this is good for me to articulate my thoughts better and like understand why I do what I do.
So if you're a student and you're on the other side of things, what should you want to try and achieve from being a mentee? What is the best way that you can open yourself up to gain as much from that experience?
Yeah. So an example of what not to do would be come to someone like me and I want to learn designer. Never opened design, I want to learn it. I've given people refunds, and I made a blog post a while back where like, so you want to be a materials artist, and I linked every tutorial I followed to learn. I'm like, you've paid good money to be mentored. Take your money back. Go watch all this free content that's available. Come back, and then we'll get into it. I don't want to sit and show you this is what this button does. This is what this button does. When you can get it for free. So come in with a clear goal. Like, I want to get to here, and like sometimes I have to help them find it. Like, the first call is always trying to help them like get their bearings, get their radar figured out. But don't come in focusing on hard skills. There's not enough time in a day for me to teach all the nuances to design now, or all the nuances to ZBrush or Unreal Engine. What I would rather is have a goal in mind of what you want to make or where you want to go. And I help you get there. I'll give you art direction feedback, and like, I've got a very specific problem. I've tried to make the thing in Substance Designer and I can't get that look. Okay, put this node, and this node together, and you'll probably get the result. I want them to want to try and do it themselves. I don't want to have to hold your hand and say, right, now put that node, now this one, now that, to make a simple tile like material. Like, try and be proactive, try and do it yourself. And then when you come to me with a piece which is like 50% of the way there, I can help you get to the other 50%, rather than starting at 0 and me having to spend an hour walking you through to 50. So that's the main thing. Like, and that happens more often than you think. I've had a couple of mentorships where it's literally gone, they're making a prop and they go, what do you think? That detail's a bit weird. Why'd you put it there? I don't know. Do you have any reference for it? No. All right, take it out. All right, show me another thing. That's a lot of dirt. Is that in your reference? No. How much dirt's in your reference? This much. All right, go with that. And it's like, I spent pretty much the entire mentorship going, okay, you're not looking at your reference. Look at your reference. Look at your reference. Look at that detail. You're not thinking, like, you're not looking at this image and looking at the subtle details that go into the reference. All you see is the big cool thing with edge wear, and that's all you've looked at, not the subtle albedo variation or the roughness variation or how the damage varies across the piece. So there's a few things that I want people to come in and do, but like the main thing is just be proactive and want to be better. The other one is not be stubborn. I've had people come to me who have like failed an art test or something, and they're like, "I want you to validate me. I think I should have got a job." And I'm like, "Okay, sorry. Like, I agree. Like, I think you have a long way to go." And I do get confused when people spend good money for mentorship and then don't listen. I had an experience where I gave them a pipeline to follow. I said, follow this tutorial. One of my friends made a great tutorial about how to use clone masks in design and substance paint. So I was like, go watch this tutorial, have a go, and then next week we get into the details. He comes back next week, and I'm like, oh, so could you just do that thing? Oh, yeah. And he's like fumbling around in the painter, and I'm like, did you follow that tutorial? He's like, yeah, I watched it. I was like, okay, cool. Could you do the thing? And it's still fumbling around. I'm like, did you follow that tutorial? No. Okay. Why? I didn't. Okay. Well, we're not gonna do this call now because we're not gonna waste one of our calls going over the same thing again. So go and come back. Next week he hadn't done it either, and it's like, do you want to do a mentorship or not? Like, mentorships aren't easy. They're quite intensive. They are time consuming. They are probably a lot of pressure because you've got somebody in the industry actually telling you what to do, and when you don't do it, they will hold you accountable and say, hey, what the fuck, do you want to do this or not? Like, so I'm calling out a lot of things not to do. It's a lot easier to say what not to do, because when I have a good, I'd say here's Frederique is a girl I've just finished a mentorship with. She was fantastic. Every week I'm like, right, here's the things we should look at. I don't like this, I don't like that. That needs detail. She comes back next week. She's gone and found free tutorials for all the things I was talking about, shaders or like brushes or whatever. She's gone and done it, come back and I'm like, okay, you've got the foundation there. Too much moss, too much dirt. The dirt's really kind of cloudy and not very detailed. You haven't got much like of this detail there. She goes away, she comes back, listen to what I said and try to do her best to fix it. And then I give her a push in the right direction. Okay, your dirt looks good now, but now the moss doesn't have a foundation to it. We need to add some extra props to it to help it like feel more volumetric. And she went away and she did it. And she ended up with a fantastic piece at the end of it. That common sense and proactivity is really important for mentorships. The more you're willing to put in, the more you're going to get out at the end, because it gives me more to work with and to push you in the right directions and give you good art direction. So that's a bit of a rambly answer as well. So hopefully that answers your question.
No, I think it's good to know that it's sort of a reciprocal relationship, and that the expectation outside of university and mentorships is just exactly the same as what it should be inside as well, depending on level. I don't seem to see any more questions within the comments. Jonah, do you have any more at all?
I think, to be honest, I had a lot of questions at the start and they got answered midway through. There's a lot of questions about, like, especially the pipeline stuff too. It's really, really useful to know about. I guess your key thing you're looking for is efficiency, right? Don't be doing like unique textures for multiple modular pieces and stuff like that. You want to see like shaders being used to for less time spent and stuff like that.
Yeah, I just don't want to see understanding the game, like where the expenses in games, like textures are expensive and like using smart solutions. I don't need to see the craziest techiest solution. I just need to see you're aware of it and considering it. Like when I ask you, here's the thing I always say to like every mentee at the end, like understand the pipeline I've taught you and the workflow I've taught you, so that when I ask you in an interview, why'd you make the modular kit like that? Well, I decided to make it like that so that I only had to have 4 unique normal maps instead of 12 unique textures. So I decided to do it like this. Cool. Okay, great. That's a really good answer. Like, I don't need details. I don't need some crazy fancy solution. You're demonstrating you understand the very basic fundamentals of how to make a game. Now, that's very basic. Obviously, this can abstract out to much more things. But that's the gist of it. I just want you to be able to talk through your piece and have a good reason for decisions. Which is, maybe that's more of a me thing, because I'm a very pragmatic person, but I know every time I interview people and Here's what annoys me in interviews is I ask a question and I don't get an answer. They talk around the question. Then I have to ask the question again. I talk around it a bit more, and then I have to give them the answer I'm looking for, and then see if they can like talk to it with their piece, and they can't. And I'm like, okay, that's a real big red flag. Versus like someone I interviewed recently, they asked a question, and they answer the question, and then branch off onto multiple topics related to that question, and then come back to the question. Fantastic answer. Like I'm like, great, you know fully what I want, and you also know all this side stuff too. So yeah, that's the main thing. It's been because it all comes down to an interview. Like when all these pieces of work we're doing and beautiful art we're making, you have to be able to talk about it. And actually, a piece of advice for this is get used to hanging out on Discords, talking to peers, and talking about your work. Not in this is my work, like, and being egotistical, as in get people to ask you questions in those Discords and get practice on justifying reasons, because people may pose questions to you like, you made it like this, why didn't you make it like this other way? And if you don't have an answer, say I wasn't aware of that solution, which is nothing wrong. I actually really like seeing humility in people who can in an interview say, I don't know, like I genuinely don't know, and that's something I should probably look at. That's a very good character trait to see in someone. So yeah, get used to a bit of advice, hang out on Discords, and get used to talking about your work and get people to prod and probe why you made things. It's a very helpful skill.
I guess something else that seems like really obvious now, given the talk, but I'll ask it anyways because I've had like a range of different answers for this, or like advice, I guess, is when you look at people's art, right? Are you more looking for they can adhere to the technical limitations of a game and they can adhere to the development pipeline, right? Or are you looking for someone that can make good art? Or is it both? I'm guessing it's both, but like if you were to weigh up like the importance of which one you're looking for, which is the most important?
I want good art. Like for me, I want to see good art. I think adhering to some sort of pipeline is enough of a technical limitation. Obviously, if you like, this is with a grain of salt. If you throw in a 2 million try rock, I'm going to be raising an eyebrow. But the thing to remember is every game optimizes in different ways. Like literally every project I've ever been on has a different way to optimize textures, has a different way to optimize meshes, different budgets, because this also comes down to like how we stream and all that sort of stuff. So start with good art on a solid foundation. Now, a good question I tend to come up with is, how would you optimize this in an interview? And I say, oh, you've got this beautiful piece of work. You said it was X amount of tries. If I told you need to like optimize it, well, where would you start? Your answer might be, I'd go through first I make custom LODs, and I'll start there, and I would change the lodding out distance and see if I could like save tries there. Secondly, I might see if there's some better packing solutions to like reduce resolution on some of the textures without sacrificing quality. And you can step through in an interview what you would do, but for portfolio piece, I think good art's first. You can always optimize later, and also optimization is subjective. We need to get down to we need to save whatever a couple of milliseconds on load. Not all the rocks need optimizing. Maybe only 2 or 3 or 4 or 5. Maybe it's just optimizing one of our tilers that gets shared across the entire library needs to be optimized. Maybe it's a shader thing. It's nothing to do with the art. So yeah, focus on good art on a solid foundation of pipeline. Don't worry too much about optimization. It's gonna sound weird, but it's too subjective a thing to focus on, because whatever you do could be scrutinized. I wouldn't do it like that. We would do it like this. And we teach that in every studio. Every studio you go to, they show you how we do our thing. This is our set of tools of how we do this. There's your documentation. Go read it and adhere to it. So yeah, for your portfolio piece, focus on good art. I want to see artists who have a good eye, who could make good content, who understand where detail is required and how to compose a space and draw the eye and lead the eye. These are the important things, not necessarily I can make a 10k rock. Although making a 10k rock with a good normal map is cool and impressive, it's useless if you don't know how to put it into a scene and into a wider pipeline. So hopefully that answers your question.
Like, don't let it limit the work, basically.
No, absolutely not. Like that, like that's the balance. That's the line you're always running with tech art. Like it's a back and forth of how do we do this more efficiently without sacrificing the art. And it's that, and also that call doesn't come down to you, the artist. That's down to the directors to go, okay, we need to save 5 frames. Our vista's going to suffer. Okay, fine. Oh, we got to save 5 frames. Fine. We can only have X amount of shadow cast and lights, or this much foliage on screen, or this many animations. Like that isn't your call. Like that would be the director's call. So that's the other thing I'd consider as like, this would be your responsibility anyway. It'd be leads and directors to make these sort of decisions. You'd just be there. You'd just be told, go optimize that. Not, hey, what would you optimize? That's a bit like I'm being a bit like I'm simplifying that a little bit, but that is how it goes, pretty much.
Oh no, thank you. Helpful.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Alex, for your time. Again, very informative, and I'm glad that we've had enough time to do sort of a more Q&A piece at the end as well. I think that those opportunities are always hard to come by. So thank you very much for that, and thanks everybody else for tuning in. And we're back at 1 p.m. for our second industry talk of the day with Ian Ward, a 3D VFX artist and tutor as well. So please join us later on. Thanks again, Alex. It's always a pleasure. Hopefully,
thanks so much.
It's not as long as last time before I see your face again.
No, it's hopefully not. And Rob, thank you so much for the invitation, and thank you for putting this fantastic conference together for these students. This is really, really great to see.
Thanks a lot. See you later, everybody. Goodbye.
Bye.